both of them up. Give me just a second.
Let me know if you have residual sound, and I will put on a headset.
I think it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think it's, I don't hear it as being problematic. So, okay, so are you going to play the game? Because I have a category for you that I think you would enjoy.
Say again, please.
Are you going to play the game with me? Because I have a category that I think you would enjoy.
I will give you a provisional yes until I hear the category.
You see how you gonna come on my live stream and try to set the rules? So what?
Because as an independent person, a free person, a free global citizen, I get to determine what my behavior will be. Okay, I said let me share the category, and if I believe that I can contribute, I will most likely take the challenge. But we want everyone to make sure that they are
Good
able
morning,
to
everyone.
enjoy.
You see how I'm gonna have to kick my guest off already? Y'all see that,
Good
right?
morning. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Facebook family. I'm glad. It's nice to be back in this space with you. Life has been growing me a bit, doing some good work, but I'm so glad to be here with you today. So what is this category, Dr. Ojelade, that you would like me to participate in?
Let me share this thing. Hold on for a second. Got somebody coming and controlling my space. You see how she do me, y'all?
Anywho. Free. I am free.
Okay, let me set my timer. Hold on. Let me get my timer together. Now it did something different. I don't know what it did. Now it's got like a little different thing on here. Okay, but that is okay. Okay, so we're going to start this. So remember, this is Black Love. And since you're a Black Catholic.
Yes, I am.
We're going to use that category, okay? Name. Okay, so wait a minute. Let's remind everybody of the rules. So you have I'm going to give you a category. You have to name 5 things in that category within 10 seconds. You cannot use any filler words. No so's, ahs, us, nothing like that. And I see that people are watching. So you all jump in and hello, give us some energy. Give Dr. Earl-Lewis some energy. And so you can answer in the category too. So taking that Black Catholic knowledge, I want you to tell me 5 things that 5 things or sayings or things that are unique about Black Catholics. 5 things that are unique about Black Catholics. No so's, ahs, no fillers. Go.
There are Catholic popes. We believe that we are images of the creation of God. That picture.
10 seconds.
Oh no. One important one is that Black Catholicism was provided to the southern part of the United States by the order of the Josephites, whose mission was that their head would be no higher than that of the Negroes. That's the embrace of Black Catholicism. That tradition is out of which I come.
Well, thank you. So even though you was like way over 10 seconds.
But time is fluid within the experience of African people. We know that you're trying to impose these other centrisms on my experience, but I apologize. But yes. And I was raised.
Angela's listening. She said, ma'am, that was 3 minutes. It took you 3 minutes to say that.
But there were no
There weren't. There weren't. You did that excellent because I started out with a so, and you did that way better than I did. So I'm going to give you credit for that. Can I do one more category?
If you believe I can be successful, yes.
I don't know if you can be successful. What do y'all think? Okay. Let's see our audience. Let's see if our audience knows this category. We're going to stay with Black Catholicism. And I don't even know if there's 5 in this category, but we're going to try. Okay. Again, 5 things, 10 seconds, 5 Black popes.
Go. The five African popes. That's what you want to speak about, but I would rather talk about the saints because the 5 African popes came early in the church and they were not fully melanated. So people do not embrace them as being African because of the way in which we racialize our community. So in terms of
y'all, you see what I got to deal with? You see what I got to do with?
St. Martin de Porres. Say, okay, I will stop, Dr. Ojelade. I will cooperate. But yes, yes. But we need to have a whole, we need to talk about the engagement of Black culture within the context of these other churches. Because again, even the Roman Catholic Church belongs to Black people. We have our full experience, and people are a bit leery. They're a bit concerned because of the browning of the Catholic Church right now, with the influx of more African priests and Latin American priests. They're concerned that this is going to change the culture of the church when it's going to take us back to our origin. It's going to take us back to our original origins. So that's why it's important. But I would like for us, and I have some great guests to bring along.
I think we'll definitely put that on the calendar. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Ifetayo Ojelade. I'm a licensed psychologist and the executive director at A Healing Paradigm. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia. And as you can see, this is not only a colleague, this amazing woman is my friend, Dr. Monique Earl-Lewis. She is the director of the Faculty Development
Teaching
and Advising Center at Morehouse College. She's also an associate professor in the Department of Africana Studies, and she is an unapologetic Black Catholic. And so your sister's here. Hi, Wanda.
Hi, I invited all of the people, and I want to acknowledge the uniqueness of our department, our Africana Studies program. I am trained as an organizational psychologist, so I am very fortunate to be able to apply the training of my practice as a psychologist, an African-centered organizational psychologist, within the context of teaching and learning. So I feel very fortunate to have these amazing colleagues where we bring our gifts to enhance, prosper, and promote the survival of people of African descent across the globe.
Well, thank you, Dr. Earl-Lewis. I always appreciate just you being willing to have these conversations with me. I wanted to have a conversation about forgiveness. This was just on my heart, like Spirit just woke me up, and I didn't actually necessarily have something planned for today originally, because I figured it's a holiday weekend, people were going out of town, and then Spirit was just like, let's talk about forgiveness and whether or not forgiveness is a required part of the healing process, which I think comes up a lot. And so part of what I wanted to do in this conversation today is do kind of this dual perspective, because I'm a counseling psychologist. So I'm the type of psychologist that actually sees people and have done clinical work historically. And so I wanted to talk about what does forgiveness look like from a personal perspective, from a spiritual perspective, but then also from a clinical perspective. And then I wanted you to come on also because we have these conversations from a spiritual perspective. And although what I love about our conversations is although we have different faith systems, there's so much commonality in how we show up and in the conversations that we have. And I mean, even in the spaces of difference, we still respect that difference that's there. And so I want to start out, and I guess you already kind of did it. So in my little game, people know that you're a Black Catholic, but I want you to center yourself first and just talk a little, just briefly about when you come from the perspective of forgiveness, like define forgiveness for yourself, and what does that mean for you when you think of the concept of forgiveness? And then I'll jump in and I'll tell my perspective.
Okay. Well, when I think about how I define forgiveness, it is most certainly connected to my faith practice as a Black Catholic. It's also connected to the ways in which I learned to be in relationship with other people in my family in terms of how we're socialized in these early social systems. So as I define forgiveness first as a Black Catholic of loving my brother, my sister, as I love myself. And which is sometimes very difficult. It's sometimes difficult to love ourselves. It's sometimes difficult to love other people, to love one another as I have loved you, which is the charge of Christianity. As an individual and as a professional in the work, I define forgiveness as being able to move past the harm, the hurt, the injury that another has caused that allows me to be my best self. At a very personal level, it's not allowing anything that has occurred to get between me and my God. Because I think that my God would have to fix my heart for me to receive the blessings that are coming to me to be able to do my best work and to be my best self.
And so when I think about it, I love the way that you said that. When I think about it for myself, growing up, my perspective was a little bit different. So I grew up in California, which you know, and I wasn't raised religiously at all. So my family is historically Catholic. And so that's why you always joke that my grandparents sent you to me.
Sent me. Ashe. Yes, they did.
I don't know that they would have defined themselves. And actually, I need to ask questions about that as Black Catholics in the same way that you define yourself, because I think it's a very specific experience, a very powerful and rich experience. They are Black and they were Catholics, and I would definitely define my grandfather as a race man, but they were the only Catholics in the area that they lived in, where you lived in a town where you went to Black Catholic schools, and it was a very different experience than what they had for themselves. And so I think because of my dad's experience, he decided that he didn't want my brother and I to be raised religiously. And so my own journey of walking any type of religious and or spiritual path was something that came when I was an adult. So not until I was 19. And it wasn't until I was well into my adulthood, actually, after even graduating from undergrad, that I found my spiritual path. And for me, that spiritual path became Ifa, which is kind of the traditional way. Some people say Yoruba in the United States, but it's the indigenous spiritual system of the Yoruba people. And one of the things that stood out for me when I first started engaging in Ifa, and anybody that has ever gotten a reading or engaged in the system will know this. I was in my early 20s, and they were talking about enemies. I was like, there was always like in your readings, like, these enemies will do stuff to you and you'll have victory over your enemies. And I was like, what enemies do I have? I'm like all of like 23, 24. And I'm like, I don't think I have any enemies. Naive. And what I started to realize over time is that, people will just not like you, just, on the strength of you being you. And you'll end up in conflicts, sometimes because you do stuff, but sometimes because you simply don't do stuff. And we'll come to a kind of example, a real world, current day example of that. And as I started developing the spiritual system, one of the things that I realized in Ifa is that Ifa doesn't necessarily have this idea that you automatically have to forgive everybody. So forgiveness is there. And certainly I've gotten readings over time where something has happened and the message in the reading was, you should forgive. And then there's also messages where people have done really horrible stuff. And the message is, you will have victory over your enemies.
But we have that same messaging. And I think part of what is connected to our understanding is the way in which we operationalize, that we define that word forgiveness, because it is a thought and it is an action. And I think that we have to be very, very clear about what that says, but consistent with, and I think we also have to make a distinction between faith, religion. You understand? Because those are two totally different experiences.
So say something about that, because sometimes I think though people don't get that difference between faith and religion.
Okay, for me, in terms of my experience, my socialization, my agreement, my faith is my relationship with God, my direct exchange with that spirit. As a Black Catholic, as a Catholic, as a Black Catholic, the internalization of that is that I have these three levels of connection through God the Father, through God the Son, through the Holy Spirit. that the Spirit of God dwells within me. And so I have to be a clean vessel. But where I practice my faith, where I engage in community as a part of my spiritual practice, is within a Black Catholic church. In Mobile, Alabama, which is where I was born, we have I was a member of the oldest Black Catholic church community in the state, Most Pure Heart of Mary. When I moved to California, I was a member of St. Bridget Catholic Church, a Black Catholic church. When I moved to Miami, I became a member of St. Francis Xavier, a Black Catholic church. Here in Atlanta, I'm a member of the Mother Church. I used to be a member when I lived in Southwest of a different community, but living downtown, I attend Our Lady of Lourdes. But that is a priority for me. I cannot live in a city where there is not a Black Catholic experience. And when we've traveled together, you have been gracious to not only help me locate a Black Catholic church experience. Every time we went to Africa, yes. And in Kenya, it was such a wonderful experience because you saw the engagement of African principles within the expression of the church. So that's why I can be in the Catholic Church as a person of African descent, because it has always reflected my culture and individualized experience. But I was also born in 1965, which means I was coming out of my family who I didn't know they were Black nationalists until I began to study this theory. But they have always privileged Blackness and embraced Blackness as a core part of our identities. So everything stems from that.
I think what's interesting is that when you say faith, the way that I hear it for myself is I think of that spirituality, like my relationship with the ancestors, my relationship with the Orisha, my relationship with myself, my higher self, and that connection with the divine, which has nothing to do with the rituals that I do around my practice in terms of Ifa, which is totally different. And so even when I think about forgiveness, I think of this example for me, and we were talking about this earlier, that for me, I separate releasing of energy from the process of forgiveness. So years ago, remember I was telling you, I get these messages about having victory over my enemies, and I was very naive, and I didn't get that people wouldn't like me. And I remember having this conflict with someone that I was really close to, and I was very hurt. And now understanding, looking back, I realized that she was just really jealous of me. I was married at the time. I had kids. We had we had purchased a house. For young people, there were lots of things that were going well for us. You're trying to post it.
Oh, but I'm not going to be able to because I have to wait till I turn down the sound on my iPad. My apologies.
Because I have like two things running, and you can turn the sound off, like the thing that I have running. Okay. So we ended up in a conflict and not being friends. And I remember having to really work through emotionally the disappointment of this person being really destructive when I thought that she was my friend. And I mean, I was angry at first, and then I've spent many years in therapy. And so I was really working through the emotion and being able to release that from her. And so just releasing that energy. But I was adamant I wasn't forgiving her.
But I think that's where we disagree. I think that was forgiveness. I think people believe that just because you release the harm, the hurt, you choose to no longer carry that with you, that means you have to go and pick up that person and pretend what they did was not harmful. I think that part of how I understand forgiveness is also embedded within the sacraments of the church. So in the process, for instance, we talk about this negrescence process as a part of our identity, how we become Black in our understanding. I went through that not knowing that that's what it was at the time, because that was just the experience of me being socialized in my particular familial environment. But there's also a process work to become Catholic. So one of the core sacraments connected to being in community, being in relationship, is that of reconciliation. It's the second sacrament that we learn about as a part of our faith practice that requires me to confess my sins. In terms of saying, and people think, oh, why are you confessing to a person? That person doesn't forgive you. You're absolutely right. The priest does not forgive me of my sins. It is an exercise where I can acknowledge in a public space what I have done harmful. If I have been disobedient, it doesn't allow me to hide. So in that process, if I have been disrespectful, because when you're young, you confess that I didn't listen to my mama. I hit my brother. I hid my sister's things and didn't tell her where it was when she was looking for it. So
she's confessing right now.
Oh, she knows. Oh, my people, they know me and they love me as me. So what I'm saying is but not only do I have to give voice to my behavior that's unacceptable, I have to go and apologize or make some type of amends. Some of those amends were me engaging in prayer, me engaging in sacrificial behavior. So it may mean then you may need to help your sister with her chores this week since you were not helpful to her before. That would be my act of reconciliation. It means you don't hit your brother. You understand? So I'm saying, so it's a process work whereby you have to acknowledge what you did when you are the offender and make restitution, make amends, but it's a truth-telling tool because the forgiveness, the reconciliation at the higher level is with the Spirit. It is with your Creator. It is with God, who sees all, who knows all. So I think that those are the differences in understanding sometimes.
So though, I think so it's funny because as I'm listening to you and I'm reflecting on our conversation before, it's like we're saying the same thing but kind of using different terminology. Because for me, it's a separation in the process. It's releasing, forgiving, and then possible reconciliation. And so when I was talking about my former friend earlier, there was a releasing that happened. And then years later, I was talking to another friend and I was talking to her about the conflict because she was familiar with the person. And she started telling me, excuse me, about this former friend's history, like her early history. And it was very, very, very traumatic. And I remember and at that point, I'm sure I had my PhD. And so I remember having this sense of understanding of why she had done the things that she had done. And like I could see it really clearly. And it really allowed me to forgive her at that point. Now, do we talk? If I saw her, would we come up to each other and say hello? I probably wouldn't. But I was able to forgive her, which I saw is very different than the releasing process. And I'll give you an example that kind of comes from an Ifa space. So there's this quick story. And this is kind of like an origin story. It comes from a sacred scripture called Oshe and it's a story about Oshun, which is one of the Orisha that I'm initiated to. And in this particular story, so Oshun is this goddess that comes down. So God sends these 17 Orisha to the earth, and 16 are male, 1 female. So Oshun is the only female. And God says, go and create the earth and set up everything so everything can flourish. Well, the men get down here and kind of do what sometimes you expect males to do. They ignore Oshun. She's off to the side. The men are trying to fix up everything and get the earth ready, and nothing is working out. And so like the women can't have babies, like nothing is flourishing. The crops are all messed up and everything. And so the male Orisha cannot figure out what is going on. So they go back up to Olodumare, God, and say, hey, you sent us down here to work everything out and nothing is working. And God says, well, what about the woman that I sent with you? What did y'all do with the woman? And they were like, oh, she was a woman. We put her to the side. And God said, you might want to go and beg her forgiveness And so they went back to the 16 Orisha, male Orisha went back to Earth. They begged Oshun for forgiveness. And she was like, okay. And she released her power. And that is what actually allowed the Earth to flourish. And so I love that story because I think it is a good metaphor in how things are seen in Ifa. So in order for you to receive forgiveness, you got to acknowledge what you did.
Exactly, and that's a great and I really enjoy the conversation that we have around having these parallels around the experience. I want to touch on two things in your previous story. Okay, there's scripture that says, "No weapon formed against me shall prosper, and every lying tongue shall be condemned." Yes. My honey, my grandmother, you understand, that was one of our rallying cries. But inherent in that belief was that you're gonna have some enemies. You understand?
And I didn't get that when I was young.
Yes.
And I did not.
No, I understand. Yeah. So I'm saying, so I learned early that people, because an example, of course, was Christ. He didn't do anything, but they decided to crucify him. But because of the nature of human beings. Now, the second piece that I wanted to state very similarly was with the creation of Eve. God made all of these. He made every living creature under the sun, made man. And he was like, I need to do something else. And one of the things that people, when I talk about this creation story and the privileging of women within the word, not the way women are treated and by men, but the way in which God created Eve as a gift, as a helpmate, as a partner. It says God made man out the dirt. You understand? He formed woman from Adam's rib. So, and when Adam sinned, all creation did not fall down. But he tried to blame the woman, Eve, of course, ignoring his own role and responsibility. Yeah. And the word says, because Adam says, that woman you gave me. And he said, no. What did I tell you to do? Which is similar to your story. We share that around making sure that you are in alignment with the directive God has given you to do. And so even in that, we have to, and that's still, challenges within the church about the role of women, but acknowledging I have a right to be and do as I am without apology. But the word also says, don't be a hypocrite. So I don't have to pretend that we can continue to be in relationship after you have violated me in some way. The forgiveness is for me. It's for me not to carry that as a part of my life experience. And one of my long struggles that you will recall that I've shared was that I had to, and it says, and there's a question that says, how many times do you forgive this person? It says 70 times 70 times 70. And for those of you who are Bible scholars, if my misquote is incorrect, please drop it in the chat.
It says you will have victory over your enemies. But
Exactly. But remember, my belief is that the forgiveness is not for the person. The forgiveness is not to interfere with who I am as a person. Because as you mentioned, a friend, I remember, I graduated from Auburn, War Eagle, everybody. And so even in growing up in the South, we've had these diverse relationships, but none of them can be harmful to who I am as a person. This past election season, I was Facebook friends with someone. I had known this person since I was an undergraduate at Auburn. And which means that she was operating in these Black spaces because she had Black friends. Well, I opened my Facebook and, I've grown more of a Facebooker during the pandemic to maintain relationships during the season. But I look on the Facebook post and she has this Trump glass or button. I don't even remember what it was. So in forgiving her, I said, this cannot be in my space. So I unfriended her and moved on. We will never have a conversation about that. But I'm not going to walk around angry, upset, and mad about it. It was a moment. The forgiveness is around not carrying that with you as baggage. And it's not going to consume my psychological, emotional, or cognitive space. I understand that when it comes to the core values that we have, and it's not about people making choices. You can make whatever choices you want, but you do not have a right to be in my private space if you're engaging in belief systems and thoughts that will be harmful to me, because that means you're going to do worse later. So that was the only opportunity that she had. And I will never unfriend her. And she knows who she is.
So what you're saying, I think is important because it goes to that the part about the faith and or spirituality that we were talking about earlier. And so I was talking to one of my sister friends earlier about this concept in Ifa. And one of the things that she pointed out, which I thought was really powerful, she was just like, look, in Ifa, it's an individual basis of whether or not you might get a reading that says for you to forgive. But she was saying to me, well, sometimes the forgiveness is so you don't curse somebody, because that our mouth has power.
Yes, it does. Life and death is in the tongue.
And you have so much ashe, you have so much power in the words that you say that you could curse somebody. And what we know is if we curse somebody, what do you think gonna happen if you curse on other folks? It's a reciprocal.
Exactly. The universe is reciprocal in nature. And that's why I say that the forgiveness is about me moving forward with my life, not allowing the harm that people have done intentionally or unintentionally to interfere with my path. But the Christian Bible also says, do not cast your pearls before swine, because they will trample them into the dust. So we get to decide how to share who we are. And I think sometimes we don't value ourselves enough. I do not have to allow you into my personal space because you decide you want to be there. It is a gift. You understand? Not a right.
And I think we're probably the space, as we were talking earlier, the space where we see it different is, again, that kind of separation of the releasing versus the forgiveness. And then notice that neither one of us have gotten to the reconciliation.
But we did, because remember, in order to reconcile, the person has to acknowledge what they did. Everyone does not have the ability to do that. So I don't care why she did that offensive Trump posting in this space with other African people. You understand? Because that means then at the core of who you are, you do not value our relationship, because you would have known not
that was problematic.
Exactly. So you got to go.
So and so for me, I think, and I see this a lot, and so it kind of goes back to the story that I said about Oshun. Is it's one, in order for us to be even able to get to the point of reconciliation, you got to acknowledge what you did, and you got to make restitution. So they asked for forgiveness, and then they were making restitution because then they allowed Oshun, which I didn't say in the story, they allowed Oshun to come and participate now. So there's some kind of restitution that has to happen for me.
Not always.
Well, for me,
no, I know, and I'm saying no, and I'm saying that not all. I don't think our relationships need to be reconciled. I don't think I need to be in a relationship with people who present themselves as harmful. So I'm saying that. So that's why I was saying that it's important for us to clarify what we mean around the act and the practice. And the definition of what forgiveness is. But that's only if I'm hearing you correctly, that's to be able to be in relationship with people. Okay.
Yes, to be
so we agree.
And I think it depends on the type of relationship. So I was at, unfortunately, I was at a funeral this past weekend, and for a really young person, and there were people there, because we're all parents and have children, or around this age. We showed up, and there's folks now that we've got 20-year-olds, and we've known each other for a long time. And so if you got a big old room and a big old funeral, some folks gonna have fallen out over 20 something years. And there was one person, one brother that came up to me, and it wasn't really so much a falling out with me. It was a falling out with my ex-husband. And, in an attempt to be in solidarity with my ex-spouse, I was no longer speaking with this person. And he came up to me and he spoke. And I mean, this is literally the first time that we've spoken in, well over a decade. And there was nothing that was said about the incident, but there was a lot said in the way things happened, the sitting down and having a meal together, the intentionality of coming up to me and hugging me, and us talking about our kids, and asking, oh, can I have my son call you because he's trying to do X, Y, and Z. And so there was lots of things that were in there that were attempts at repairing something. Now, does that mean that we're going to be on the phone next week? No, not at all. But I do think that it is important for us to have that space where we open our hearts when people reach out in reasonable ways. And this wasn't something that was life-changing. So I see, it was reasonable for that to kind of get repaired somewhat.
But I also hear in that sharing that the relationship was severed, not as a result of anything either one of you did.
No, it was a result of something that he did.
No, exactly. So I'm saying that it wasn't something you did. You were not the injured party or the source of the injury. Because
not indirectly, not directly, yeah.
So again, you were not responsible for the action that occurred.
No,
you were only responsible for your decision to remain in solidarity with your partner, which is what a larger commitment was. And we stand by the people that we love, as my grandmama said, when they wrong or when they right. But you need to have Jesus with you in the meantime so that you can figure out what's happening, because she was remember, this is a Christian Catholic family, because she was a convert from the AME church. So that's all that I'm saying. So you would have your deities, your Orishas that accompanying you on this journey. But I don't think that, but what I also recognize is that people are sometimes in a lot of pain. And what we are experiencing is the pain of their experience in response to the light that we have.
Yeah. And I think that, and I want to comment on that, and then I want us to kind of move forward and think about this. I want to make some comments about this from a clinical perspective. I think that is so important. And let's tie this, because I sent that video where Tabitha Brown responds to Wendy Williams to you. And I loved Tabitha Brown's response to Wendy Williams. So if y'all haven't seen it, then, jump online. I don't think you necessarily need to see what Wendy Williams says, just because that negativity is not important to get into. But basically, it was just an attack, a commentary, an unsolicited commentary on the relationship between Tabitha Brown and her husband, Chance Brown. And I think that was, or is it Chance or Choice? I forget what her husband's name is. And it was an inappropriate comment. And the kind of comments that people will say when they're in a lot of pain. And I love that Tabitha Brown could immediately identify that. And one thing that I think we can do is that we can automatically go on the attack. Someone attacks us, particularly living in this society. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to be unproductive and attack other people. And that's not what she did. She was like, bless your heart. It sounds like
it was an act of. Yeah, and that is, and I think that, and that I had seen the video because someone shared it with me yesterday, but I didn't know the context out of which she was responding to. But what I saw after you provided the context, and I still have not seen the precipitating event, what I saw was, from my perspective, from my socialization, my cultural religious experience, was an act of love. Where she did respond, but she responded in love. She responded in forgiveness It did not change what she thought, how she felt, but she did not internalize that attack, that characterization, that need to authorize her behavior, because she is anchored, and she broke it down in terms of, you made that fundamental attribution error in terms of being a psychologist, where that means you apply understanding to a situation outside of its proper context. She said, so let me explain. This man loved me enough. I want you to have that kind of love. I love him this much. I want you to be able to love this much. I want to honor and protect him as he has honored and protected me. I want him to be able to share and engage his gifts daily as a result of the sacrifice he made for me to be able to do this. We decided this together. This was our marital agreement. This was what was valued within our relationship. And I pray, and I'm asking the community to pray, that you too will have that experience.
And then she was basically like, get you some business.
But I didn't hear her throwing shade. I heard her being authentic and responding in love to our sister, who we know has been in a lot of pain, publicly, privately. And so that's the piece we, in terms of this Afrocentric paradigm, we have to keep, and this is a part of my familiar practice too, is that just because the people you love are unhealthy, they may be unsafe. You provide barriers of protection and support, but you don't give them the opportunity to be harmful to you without your permission.
Ashe.
Yes.
And so let's kind of move forward. So I think we set a good foundation of our personal perspectives about forgiveness. And so I was going to say, mine is definitely sounds situational. And but I think the smaller things. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I'm saying, no, you're right. It absolutely is. I think we have to take each situation, because there is no one size fits all for forgiveness outside of not allowing it to be harmful to you. I think we would agree on that. I would not expect a person, for instance, if, and this is real talk, there were people that my grandmother, my mother, they did not leave us alone with.
Oh, yeah. And
okay, you understand? So, okay. So very clear. So because you are not going to act in terror here.
Exactly.
If I had a great aunt, I think I shared this with you, that would bite us on our cheeks as children. But my Virgo personality was like, you can't touch me. So when my grandmother said, why won't you let this person hug you, kiss you? I said, because she bites me. My grandmother said, no more. So I'm saying that there is so I forgave her for biting me, but I'm not going to, first, shame on you the first time, shame on me the second time. But that was also buttressed it was also accompanied by this protection of me being a person and not having to allow people to do things to me, to my body, against my will early on as a child. And so that's why I'm saying it is situational.
Yeah, and for me, it's the release is important. That part is absolutely important. What is not like absolute is this idea of forgiveness, because I separate it, and for me it's situational. I see Bahati made a comment. Yes, Bahati was saying that Tabitha Brown's response is it was beautiful, and then Michael Douglas says Association Black Psychologists, aspiring Black psychologists, AB Psy is a great conversation to drop in on. So I wanted to kind of move the conversation forward and look at this from a clinical perspective. So I know you reminded me that you always say I'm not a clinician.
I am not, because I'm hired. I don't fix people. I fix problems in organizations, and it becomes problematic if people aren't able to engage in the act of forgiveness as relates to advancing work in organizations. We have practices, processes to reconcile that so people remain safe and unharmed. But again, I think that that the forgiveness piece is separate from the reconciling in relationship or giving you permission to be harmful to me again. So I think that's how our language separates. But I think that we're in agreement about the actions and the process.
And for me, what I think is really important and why I wanted to start the conversation out like this is for those of you that are clinicians that are watching, and so if you are a clinician, you need to be clear about what your definition of forgiveness is, what that looks like, and what are your beliefs. What are your cultural, your spiritual beliefs, your religious beliefs around forgiveness? So once you get the clarity about that, and that's why I asked Dr. Earl-Lewis to join me in having this conversation. Once you have the clarity, if you are a clinician seeing clients, you got to recognize that your clients have different beliefs around this. And it is very important that you don't impose your personal, cultural, religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs, your faith, on your clients. And so me as an EFI practitioner, if I'm seeing Dr. Earl-Lewis coming in, then and she's clearly a Black Catholic, I can't impose my religious beliefs on her. And so that's the same thing with the concept of forgiveness is I recognize that there's a way that I think about forgiveness that is very unique to my own personal belief. And that belief around forgiveness is not automatically tied to healing. So people can heal, they can walk through an entire process. And that's particularly important when people have long-term traumatic experiences. They can go through this process of healing and they don't necessarily have, I shouldn't say necessarily, they don't have to forgive the person. And I think a good example of that is everything that's going on with Bill Cosby right now. And so we'll kind of leave, his other the reasons that he got out of jail, and we can leave that to the side. But let's look at this idea of the concept of the people that have been harmed, all of the women, the 50 women that came forward that have been harmed. And if I'm waiting on Bill Cosby to apologize or make reconciliation, if I was one of those women, that's not going to happen. And for some folks, that process of healing might include forgiveness, but then there's other people that process may not include forgiveness, and that is actually okay. And I think that that's important because what oftentimes I hear is clinicians marrying those two things together. So they'll talk about forgiveness and they act as if forgiveness is something that is an absolute to the healing process, and it's not.
And I also think what's so critical about what you're saying and important for people to revisit is that, again, it's about moving past the pain, not carrying that injury. And if that's the goal of forgiveness, that I am no longer burdened with this harm that this person has imposed upon me. Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation for everyone. It does not mean that I have to engage or seek you to be in relationship anymore. It only means that I have moved past my pain from this experience, the way that I see it, and I'm able to go on a healthy path. But I do not forget the harm, because when it shows up again, those characteristics in a different person, I need to self-protect.
Yes.
Around not being in a position where I may be harmed again. And so this happens, and that's why I'm saying that not everyone is going to acknowledge, as you're saying, which is the first path, the first step, in so many ways, acknowledgement. And so as a part of my being a Black Catholic, being a Catholic, that sacrament required you to talk about what you are doing that is not right. So that's a socialization that we learned early on, being able to speak truth about not just how wonderful I am as a person, but my shortcomings, where I fail. Exactly. And to say, and sometimes, and it doesn't happen immediately. And sometimes forgiveness may take years. It's not like the microwave, you put it in there and pop, pop, there it is. But as long as you are moving towards healing your own pain, I think that is the core essential ingredient for forgiveness. It doesn't mean we're ever going to talk again. But I'm not carrying you with me, but I will commit to my memory the behaviors that are harmful to me, so that if they show up again, as my grandmother said, you cut that tree off at the root.
You didn't say it clearly though. You said it more formally. Cut the tree off at the
root.
Thank you.
That's it. Sorry, this is my headset. So I think that I also admire the work that you all do as clinicians, counseling psychologists, and I'm so grateful to be a part of this community. But my calling, because I did study, as you know, with the master's in behavioral studies and counseling, but Spirit said, this is not where your gift strength is. Your gift strength is in resolving problems where you can be more proactive in bringing about solutions within these systems and these structures. So it's wonderful to be able to work in my environment as an organizational psychologist and to make referrals to my colleagues who can help both the offenders and the offended find healing in their lives. And so it's a part of this practice of our community to maintain the integrity of the community, but not allow people to be harmful to the members.
Well, and I think for me, that's the thing with the whole Bill Cosby situation is, so yes, it was, I mean, we look at the legal reasoning. I mean, this solid legal reasoning. So this unjust legal system was just for him because he's got money. But then on the other hand, look at the victims. And so now what we know is we have a predator that gets released back in the community. And so I think we have to think about that. Now, what does that mean that this justice system works in these ways where people that are problematic for the community get released and people that are fighting for social justice for the community are incarcerated? There's something wrong with that kind of system.
Absolutely.
And I think we need to look at that. I see Bahati made a comment. She says in her community, Bahati, are you talking about it in Ndugu Nzinga? And Ndugu and Nzinga, she was saying in her community, they have a definition of forgiveness, and it's one's ability to accept one's own failings, the failings of others, and seek healing when those failings produce hurt. I like that.
Okay. I like that. That's consistent. Like that. That's consistent. So thank you. And maybe, and hopefully with her permission, you can post that. Because I think that I agree with that.
On the screen with that. I can post it on the screen. Let me ask her for permission. She was just responding to me. If she says yes, I'll post it on the screen so people can see.
Think about the ways in which and so remember I said earlier that part of the writing in the Christian Bible, the Christian Bible, Catholic Bible, is about how many times do you forgive. Think about how often we have to forgive the ones who are close to us in our families. That's forgiveness but that's because we want to be in relationship with those individuals most of the time. Then when we think about our colleagues at work, well, I can limit my engagement with you unless it's a critical position or placement in an organization. But if you are unhealthy to me, if you are violating the laws of good citizenship, of community within this organization, then there are ways to rectify that. If the value of the community is in reconciliation, and we also have to begin to think about these ideas associated, and I know we're running out of time, around restorative justice practices.
Yes.
How do we reconcile and make right and make equitable the experience after harm has been done?
And that I think we miss a lot, because what gets pushed more and gets pushed out front is the concept of forgiveness. So I can't tell you, Monique, how many times that somebody sat in my chair and I asked them about something that's painful, and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm over that. I forgave on that." And I'm like, "No, you hadn't, because you over here bleeding all over my couch. What you talking
Exactly.
about? You have not forgiven." And part of
Mm-hmm.
that is because there's this and it's kind of a dominant narrative. It's a Judeo-Christian narrative of the automatic idea of forgiveness without the complexity that you're talking about today. And that's why I wanted you to have.
But that is, yeah, and I think this is where we part company. Everything that if people have not internalized as a part of their identity, their practice, those Judeo-Christian ethics, then that's not what you're seeing. So I take great pause because all Christians, all professed Christians, aren't Christians of practice. So I think we have to be very, very clear about, first, we have to contextualize it. Is there congruence between your profession what you speak truth about, what you hold as a measure for others, and the practice of your own life experience? That level of authenticity takes a great deal of work. That not only am I asking you to hold me accountable, what I say is my practice of truth. That when I do not meet my own standards, you have my permission to hold me accountable.
And
a lot of people don't want to be held accountable.
Missing. I think that's what you're saying is really important, because I think that's the part that's missing, because there's so many times, like with I think her name was Amber Geiger, the police officer that went into the brother's house when he was at home in his apartment minding his own black business, and she shot him. And then you remember his young brother, I think he's like 17 or 18, went up to her and said he forgave her automatically. And I'm like, wait a minute, pump the brakes. So there's lots of conversation about this kind of automatic forgiveness that doesn't really look at ideas of, like what you just said, what we're not exploring enough is restorative justice. What does that look like when communities are being harmed? You can't just shoot people over and over again. You can't harm people, you can't molest people or sexually assault people over and over again, and then just be like, oh, okay, we're just going to forgive and give just lip service to that. There's this person that is harmful in the community, and and those things have to be addressed. There has to be some accountability there. And so Bahati is asking, I don't know that either one of us can answer this question. And Bahati is asking, what does restorative justice look like for Bill Cosby? Should he be in a treatment center? What should that look like? Most people who believe he is innocent believe he has served his time. One thing that I will say, Bahati, is the whole idea of the folks that say that they believe that he's innocent. I think that is the part of the psychological attack on our community. Our community will not be safe. And when I say our community, I'm talking about people of African descent in this country. We will never be safe until our women and children are safe. And if we have predators in our community, I don't give a damn how much money they have. I don't care how many lawyers they have. I don't care if they're considered America's dad and they made a show that everybody loved when we were little. If we do not hold people accountable for harming those within our community will never be safe. And anybody that does not understand that at a fundamental level is not safe. Period, point blank. So I like to look at my feed when folks are posting that foolishness about he's innocent and, he's trying to buy NBC or CBS or whatever he was trying to so-called buy, and that's why he was in jail. I don't want to hear that stuff, because now I know that you're dangerous.
And I don't think that restorative justice, as you're saying, Dr. Ojelade, will ever manifest in this situation because of the failure to acknowledge the harm. Because restorative justice means I have to acknowledge what I did, and I want to make amends. How can I help? What do you need from me? But it's a process that occurs before people actually engage one-on-one. I don't think that that particular principle will apply here, as you were saying, because there will never be there will never be a public acknowledgement, because we even know that the reason why he was released is because of a confession that was not supposed to be used against him the way in which the laws work. So although that one individual may have received some type of acknowledgement about the harm they received, they endured, they were not allowed to make it public as a part of this agreement that which was the loophole to release him to be out now. So for this situation, I don't think that that restorative justice will be an issue here. I don't even think it's an opportunity. It's no option. And I agree that until we value the women and children of our communities, until we value each other, hold each other accountable when we see that harm is taking place, because unfortunately, there's too much complicity in our community around harm to others in our community. So I think that we all have to be able to recognize our own pain, our own limitations. We have to understand how to ask for help if it's not for ourselves, for others, to try to connect them to the resources that will help them be safe. We have to share out of what we have in terms of our time, our talents, our treasures, to be able to build this beloved community. This is this idealized space that we want to live in. And we have to be able to have these conversations that we have, Dr. Ojelade, where we find the overlapping spaces between my belief, your belief, our shared understanding, because across all of these spiritual places, we share the same ancestors. We share the same spirit, and we want to achieve the same goals of being healthy, of being loving, being able to love. But if people reject that, you move on from that.
Well, and I think I love what you said, because part of, I think, what we have to be able to do is utilize the resources in our community. If we think 20, 30 years ago, perhaps we didn't have a lot of Black psychologists. Black psychology, well, started around 50 years ago, but we didn't have the resources that we have now. We have folks that are clinicians within our community that understand restorative justice, that understand working with, and I was trying to get one of my colleagues to come on today, and she wasn't able to do it. Taisha Nelson, Dr. Taisha Nelson, who works with what she defines as sexual predators, and Black sexual predators. And so she has a whole idea about restorative justice for sexual predators. Also, we need to understand the concept of personality disorders. And, um, as a psychologist, I can never diagnose somebody that I can't see. So I always have to say that kind of disclaimer. But when we look at folks that repeatedly harm, and so we can think about that in a number of folks, and in this situation, we can think about, recent administrations in this country where you see someone that is a pathological liar, that's always harming, that's engaging in criminal behavior, that shows no remorse, that shows them, that perceives himself as the victim and is just harmful over and over again. That is a psychological diagnosis that falls under the category of personality disorders. And what we do in our community sometimes is we don't give enough credit, or we don't seek out the resources of a Dr. Monique Earl-Lewis that understands pathology within organizations, or like myself, Dr. Ojelade, that understands pathology in terms of individuals. The reality is, even if we don't want to admit it within our community, there is pathology that exists. And some of that pathology, then ideas like restorative justice, personally, I think are going to be very difficult. And like, that's not something, if you have someone that does not admit that they're harmful to other people, you can't get to restorative justice, period, point blank. You can't.
Absolutely.
And
And I think one of the things, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that again. I want to bring this back to our community, our social systems of origin, our family. and the overlay of whatever our spiritual, religious, and faith practices are, that if I learn in my family that I cannot take your food out of the refrigerator because I want it, and if I do, I have to make amends. So I'm saying I learned the concept of restorative justice in my family, but it was around respecting the individual, not about, in terms of learning not to be harmful to other people. So if I learn not to be harmful to other people in my family, then I'm less likely to be harmful to other people outside of my family. I'm less likely to be harmful to people in my organizations, in terms of the communities. And then, so I'm saying that some of the healing work has to begin in our own communities of practice, within our families, within our sister circles, within our associations, where we are turning our enemies into allies, when we're turning our enemies into accomplices, when we're turning our enemies into advocates, because people show up, the sum total of who they are. But it's up to me to tell the individual, you can't do that. And that is not acceptable. Exactly, in a respectful way. But I'm not going to stop showing respect for myself, which is what I so love about the video, in terms of Tabitha Brown's response. She maintained the integrity of herself. She spoke her truth. Like you said, she was not angry. I don't even think she was hurt. She just really said, look, I wish this for you because this is what I have. And I trust that it will find you.
Yes,
indeed.
On that note, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you, Dr. Earl-Lewis. I appreciate
Thank you. And I get to choose the next Black Jeopardy game when we come back on. Okay? Thank you, Facebook community. Thank you, my folks, for showing up today. And thank you for inviting me, Dr. Ojelade, because you know I stay in the shadows. But thank you for including me in today's conversation.
I feel
this is part of the work.
It is. And I feel like there's so many places that we can go, because I didn't even get to talk about, I mean, I was like thinking, oh, like, you know, and what does forgiveness look like in the therapy process? Because I have ideas about that, and what things, what kind of interventions work for people to actually get to the point of forgiveness. I had all kinds of ideas, but an hour always goes by really quickly. So everyone, do me a favor. I see folks that are listening. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. I know that you are probably going off and having a long weekend. And so if you can, do me a favor and like this video. If you want to make sure that you see every week when we go live, if you want to get a notification, make sure you click the notification buttons, because Facebook, you know, like these capitalistic machines that they are,
analytics.
They don't automatically let you know that I'm live. But I'm here every single Friday at 12. So make sure that you like it. Do me a favor and share this if you appreciated this conversation. Even after we go off, you can definitely share a comment. Next week, we are talking about Black foodways, i.e., all the kind of historic things that Black people have done with their food. We're going to talk about the series that I absolutely loved, High on the Hog.
Yes.
Have you finished it?
Thank you. Yes, I finished it and I assigned it to my students.
Yes. Good. I knew you would like
excellent.
It was amazing. So everyone, we will see you next week. Take care.
Yes.